hating on Joe Brady coming back to LSU. Where is that? Where does that come from?
Just How did the tenor change so quickly?
Just because of his failures with Sam Darnold and
Teddy
Christian McCaffrey never
and
being
Cam Newton, and you have no Christian McCaffrey.
I don't understand.
They stunk before
the Brady hate, like as a possibility. Now, what I've always said, that was a pretty ringing endorsement by Mickey Joseph as Joe Brady, the recruiter. If you want to go back and check out that sound, you should do that. It was pretty good to hear Mickey Joseph talk about Joe Brady in that role. As a recruiter, something that we always thought that he was not into, something that always kind of jumped off of something that would prohibit him from being a real player at a college job. Forget an OC like as a head coach. But Mickey Joseph said and had some pretty good things to say about Joe Brady, the recruiter, and said that Brady doesn't even know how good of a recruiter he is. So, the possibility, and with the NFL stench of being released and fired within the season, I don't know if somebody jumps on you as quick as the college game would. I mean, if Brady said, I'm open for business on both the college and NFL level, he'd be hired by midnight. And probably would be like Alabama. Or Florida with Napier, or Brent Venables just got the job at Oklahoma, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I mean, I'm sure Scott Frost at Nebraska, would call him. He would be hired. What time is it right now? It's 8:35 Central Time. He'd be hired by 9 o'clock Central Time if he said, I'm open for college.
That's the part that concerns me, is I don't want to see him at Bama or at Florida. I don't want to see him somewhere else.
Did Oklahoma's going Venables, right?
Yeah. They were going to.
But there are jobs open to where he could get a college head coaching job. But if you're an LSU fan, do you think you don't want Joe Brady back as offensive coordinator? Like, imagine this happened retroactively a week ago, and LSU's job was still open. He gets fired before that. People would be clamoring to have him as the LSU head football coach, right?
Agreed.
Like, wouldn't he be the first name on the board?
Joe Brady?
If he had gotten fired a week ago,
yes,
people were calling
he would
for
be the first name
time
that people wanted. And now it seems like the fire has been put out on him for some reason. And like you said, dude, he's been working with Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, who says I see ghosts,
Cam Newton,
who's back and not back, and no Christian McCaffrey ever. Like, he never got to use the full extensiveness of his weapons in Carolina.
Well, look at the quarterbacks he would be coming back to. With Max Johnson, Garrett Nussmeier, Walker Howard.
And the wide receivers.
He would pick Walker first, right? Like, he
absolutely.
could just,
without a doubt.
let's just do this together.
Yes.
You're more Joe than anybody.
He's looking for,
Burrow.
Well, and look, man, he's not out there. He's the white whale, but I'm just talking about from an athletic, arm strength, brains, the full package. He probably checks more boxes than any of them. Mark Vaughn, anyone can go after and have Brady. Why, Mark?
I don't think so. Like, what is this?
Why? I mean, why would you have that outlook from an LSU fan? You wouldn't clamor to have him back, knowing how organized his offense was more than anything. And look, I give Burrow a ton of credit for 2019. I think that Burrow deserves a ton of credit. But just look at the offensive efficiency from 2018 when you still had Burrow. And Burrow from the Georgia game one, his junior season, was one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He really was. Week in, week out. The numbers said it. His production, his impact on the game. I mean, he was definitely a dominant player in 2018 from the Georgia game on. But when Brady got there, he was a rocket ship, right? I mean, because of just the concepts, the organization, the route tree, everything that went into that 2019 offense. I think that as much as Joe Burrow deserves a ton of credit, and I think he deserves probably the majority of it, to me, Joe Brady is a great example of why coaching matters. Like, you can look at 2018 and look at 2019 and say you really have a lot of the same players. You got Jamar Chase as a youngster on that team. Terrace Marshall is a youngster on that team. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a veteran on that team. I mean, you've got guys on that team. Justin Jefferson was on that team. Joe Burrow was on that team. When you look at that 2018 squad, then you look at the 2019 offensive efficiency, and you say, wow, I mean, the overriding difference there. And you say, well, look, Burrow took the next step. He really matured physically in the offseason. He really got it right. But also they hired a offensive genius, or at least kind of like like an up-and-coming offensive mind in Joe Brady that really organized the offense. And I thought that Brady was always a good testament for what coaching means and why it matters in all sports. Because, they're not going to go out there and throw the passes for you, but behind the scenes, they can really break things down and show you, look, if they do this, if the defense does something like this, well, then we're going to react and do that. And this is going to be open because of this. And it just was this wonderland of football, with Joe Burrow as the main character and Joe Brady playing the top and lead supporting cast member. And I think that Brady, people bailing on Brady is nuts.
Unbelievable.
It's nuts.
Would you not?
It is wild.
Would you not take him here in a heartbeat if you said that, the LSU OC job is open, which it is? And if you said Joe Brady was I'll even go back a week ago, like you said, just because he got fired, it makes it seem like people are off of him now. Like, okay, yeah, things didn't work out. He never had his full deck to play with.
Yeah,
he never had all 52 cards.
I'm not judging the NFL book on Brady just yet. It's so unfair. No Sam Darnold. No Christian McCaffrey, Teddy Bridgewater.
The question remains: Cincinnati. Would that not be the perfect fit for him to go be the OC there?
Does Zach Taylor want to do that? Does Zach Taylor
create that kind of dynamic?
Right.
It works though. You've
seen
it.
It could. I definitely
if he doesn't want to go back to college,
they have to be playing or talking about.
Right. If Joe Brady wants nothing to do with college football, which you heard Mickey Joseph say he is a good recruiter, but he doesn't like the idea of recruiting where I'm not working on football, and you can see that in the way that he kind of portrays himself. He's a nerd. He's a football nerd that played football, and he understands. He's a chess player as opposed to a checkers player, right? And so if you could get him back in the college mold where it seems like now he's on the outs, if an NFL team doesn't want him to be a coordinator, that would be his first choice, right? He would like to go be a coordinator again. I would imagine Cincinnati would probably pick up the phone because Joe Burrow will put that thing in perspective and be like, look, we got Joe, we got Jamar, Thad Moss is still lingering around here somehow. That would be a Joe Brady fit. Yeah. But if none of those calls come, LSU seems like a very viable landing spot.
Well, don't think that Alabama and Nick Saban won't be in that line too. If you recall, Joe Brady's first public appearance after he was hired by Carolina was that he was set to speak and address the Alabama Coaches Clinic and football camp that was happening on campus. Now, this was COVIDed out.
Thank God.
It was canceled because of COVID. But the first call that Saban made was to get Matt Rule, was kind of like the key speaker, but the keynote speaker was Joe Brady behind the scenes. And I think that Saban would love nothing more than just to just to collect. It was kind of like what he did. It's kind of like what he did with Major Applewhite a couple of years back, if you remember, where there was a real big bidding war on Major Applewhite once he was released from Houston for a couple of offensive coordinator gigs. And some schools like LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Florida were trying to make him an analyst who could pay him that type of analytical money. And Saban had no use for him. He had no reason to go out there and hire him, but everybody else wanted him, so he goes to a couple of boosters, and this is the type of swing that Saban has in Tuscaloosa. The same type with people, Scott Woodward at LSU has this type of swing where you can say, hey, look, we want to get something done, and at the time LSU had Joe Oliva in power, which nobody wanted to help. But, Woodward could go to them and say, hey, look, we need to pay Major Applewhite $150,000 off the books. Like LSU's going to pay him $30,000 to get him health insurance and the 401k and all of the things and the advantages that come with being a state employee. But he's not coming here for $30,000, right? We need to get $150,000 to $200,000 raised annually that we can pay him, kind of away from LSU.
Brian Kelly contract-wise.
Exactly. And
off the books money that
Saban just made that happen. He'll do that with Joe Brady. If nobody has any use for him and nobody wants to step out there and make him, an OC, then Joe Brady would have no problem being paid and compensated very well to be the lead offensive analyst for Alabama. And as soon as Bill O'Brien is out, he's just the next in line of Sark, O'Brien, who are analyzers and become OCs.
There's no way that happens, right? If you're LSU, you don't let him get if Joe Brady's willing to come back to college. And I've realized this conversation is something that we've poo-pooed on for a long time because Joe Brady's not coming back to college. He doesn't like to recruit. Then you heard what Mickey Joseph said. He doesn't like to do it, but he's not bad at it, which isn't shocking. But there's no way if there's people that are able to take swings at Joe Brady that he ends up at Alabama. Would LSU just not throw the book at him? You can kind of name your number here because of the fanfare you have attached to you at LSU. And we're really, this has only happened in 24 hours where people don't really like you now. So I would imagine that LSU might have to overpay, but he's not going to go anywhere as an analyst. He would go there and be an offensive coordinator in college football immediately, right?
Let's see what the market says. Let's see what the market says. Who says he wants to go out to Lincoln, Nebraska, and be an OC there compared to being an on the analyst staff at Alabama? Compared, if they're offering the wide receivers coach, I agree, but I don't think that it's out of the question. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think that, the stench is definitely hovering on him a little bit as far as this experience over the last 2 years in Carolina. Does that hinder him professionally? Does that hinder him in the NFL?
I feel like he's not even the guy that farted in the room. He's the guy that sat in the couch cushion that had fart on it. And it's oh, that guy farted. And he didn't. Carolina was not built to succeed if you don't have Christian McCaffrey.
Well, this is what's crazy to me is when we hired Jake Peetz, everybody was ecstatic.
Yeah, that he was a Joe Brady clone.
Because Joe Brady clone.
Yeah.
But now we have the chance at Joe Brady.
Joe Brady, actually.
And they're oh, no.
Don't want him now.
I can't imagine that there is a majority of that. That's got to be a loud.
Overreaction.
That's got to be a loud minority. That is. Because, come on. Come on. Joe Brady to me was the great example of why coaching matters. That is somebody that you can point at and say, okay, that guy makes a difference.
It is the biggest transition in LSU football history from what happened in 2018 to what happened in 2019. You can say Joe Burrow took that step forward, obviously, but the implementing of Joe Brady's offense is what made Joe Burrow excel, right? Because you saw, dude, go back to the 2018 LSU-Alabama game at LSU. They didn't score a point. That thing did not look like an Insminger offense or an Insminger Joe Brady offense.
Yeah.
That was an absolute, this is what we do every time we play Alabama. Let's do it this way and see if it works. Joe Brady had 0 seconds to breathe. Fast forward to 2019 with Joe Burrow and Joe Brady, and look at the difference it made. Joe Brady makes a difference.
Yeah,
don't be.
I agree.
I can't believe that there's this much fodder out there of him being a subpar coach whenever you would have taken him as a head coach a week ago.
It is wild.
Brian does make a good point in the bunker saying, just talking about if Kelly would hire him, because I think that does play a factor. If Kelly would go to make that hire, because he's been coaching for so long, he has his guys.
But he missed on his guy.
Yeah.
Right? He missed on
one of them, but he has a couple.
So, does he?
What?
Well, he has a former OC that's at Tulane. But there's different guys out there.
But Joe Brady would be the first name on your board now that he's fired, right? Every college is looking at him to be at least gauge interest.
I think he's definitely got to be at the top of the list.
Because I don't know if he gets an NFL job if it's not Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's gonna have to go bang on the table.
I don't. I wonder what people like Sean McVay thinking about Joe Brady.
But that's analyst role, right?
I don't know if it's an analyst role. You can bring him in easily and let him be the wide receivers coach and just have him in the room to break down plays and tell me what you see.
So do you think he got too much too fast?
Possibly. There is a Tyrus Thomas feel to this where you think, man, another year of college and you would have been incredibly just more mature and ready for that next obstacle, ready for that next job. And I don't know if, Joe Brady, but, you knew Brady's aspirations the day he got the gig. He came from the New Orleans Saints. He was a professional football guy. And even though Mickey Joseph, like we said, gave a ringing endorsement for Brady as far as a recruiter, and his endorsement really was kind of saying, Brady doesn't know how good of a recruiter he is. And I think it's because Brady hates recruiting, right? Because he despises it and doesn't want to embrace it. But his personality is so likable, and where you sit down and you talk football with him, and if you're a football player, you're like, holy shit. This guy is a wizard. And he doesn't even really know he's recruiting you. You know what I mean? He's just showing you how much love he's got for football and how smart he is in breaking it down. And you're like, I got to
holy
come
shit,
play for this guy.
I'm going to be open every play.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if I'm not open, he's going to be open.
Well, look what he did to Jamar Chase. Like, look
Right.
at the difference between 2018 Jamar and 2019 Jamar.
Yeah.
I mean,
Justin Jefferson.
All of it.
Yeah.
He made the whole thing explode. And I don't know where he is mentally and where he wants to,
Right.
like, come back to because, as you've said, he doesn't like recruiting. That's been our whole standpoint because when we went through this coaching search, how many people asked for Joe Brady to be the LSU head football coach? Everyone.
Everybody.
If he would have been an option, that would have been the resounding yes.
Yeah.
And now it's that people have fallen off the table a little bit. But look at what he did to LSU and how he transformed it. And if you could get him back as OC, that would be a massive windfall for LSU to get Brian Kelly, Joe Brady,
Right.
and then you have kind of like the wheels start turning in motion because what's the biggest question around Brian Kelly right now? How are you going to do your staff?
Yeah.
Because the walls are starting to get a little bit tighter every now and every day.
Well, the time
It
is
moves.
crunching.
The time
Right.
is crunching because you got to recruit.
Yeah.